Hi, everyone, and welcome to our latest discussion on the Oroville Dam and its fragile spillway. I'm Steve Dempsey with the Bay Area News Group. Joining me is Oroville Mercury-Register editor David Little. And let's say his opinion pages have had plenty to say about the situation over the last 2 months. David, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, as some of you can feel, spring is in the air. Looks like maybe most of the heavy rains have subsided. So you would think maybe things are kind of calming down back to normal up in Oroville with the dam and the spillway and that situation. Well, if you talk to some of the experts and engineers, that's the farthest thing from the truth. A board of experts appointed to review the situation gave a big warning if things aren't shored up by the next rainy season, a report that originated from Associated Press. David, what was that warning that they gave?
So the warning that they gave was that unless something is in place by November 1st, which is the start of the rainy season, there will be some big problems. And one of the things they said was that they didn't think that it actually could get accomplished by November 1st. The problem is that nobody really understands the scope of what they're trying to do. In fact, DWR hasn't figured it out yet either. So there's this clock ticking in this race to try to figure out what the next steps are.
When you hear something like that, I mean, it's a race, to get this completed, and we got to get going here. I mean, how do you feel about that? I mean, talk about being a little uneasy here.
So there's still a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder in our community because of what happened last month. The evacuation was traumatic for a lot of people because there was no warning, and in 48 hours you had to be out of your house. The evacuation warning was just lifted last week, so this went on for a long time, and people are distrustful, not necessarily of local authorities, but just that DWR in general is not telling them all that's going on there. And I think people are just concerned about the spring runoff, what's going to happen, what happens if the spillway used again after it was closed down. The spillway flows were halted yesterday. And then there's that race to get something in place by November 1st or thereabouts. So there's a lot happening here.
Well, let's talk about the spillway a little bit here. I guess we knew that it wasn't in very good shape in the to begin with, and now we're learning that it was really bad shape. I mean, it was breaking apart. They were stuffing clay in some of the holes. I mean, to me that sound like the old Band-Aid to fix a shotgun wound. I mean, what were they doing up there?
Well, we can't really tell. We ran a story last week that was very interesting. Some of our photographers went back to photos that they had taken in January, and the spillway is a huge structure, right? But you can tell if there are little imperfections in the spillway. And so they took these photos from January and compared them to where the spillway started to break apart, midway down the structure. And it was very obvious that there was some sort of chasm or a hole or a crack in the spillway in January that our photographers saw from, quarter mile away with a long lens on a camera. So the question is, why wasn't this inspected on the ground? Why wasn't it inspected with the drones? Why wasn't this caught by somebody? If our camera people could see it, why couldn't DWR? And it's an unresolved question. They said they did everything according to form. They did all the inspections that they were supposed to do, but to me, what that means is that they did what they were supposed to do according to FERC, but it wasn't nearly enough. So that was the biggest revelation we've seen post spillway breakup. That it could have been seen if somebody was paying a little bit more attention.
Okay, well, let's talk about who probably should have been paying more attention, and let's talk about the Department of Water and Power. And first off, what about their attitude toward this whole episode?
So it predates this whole episode. 9 years ago, there was a really frightening incident in the Hyatt power plant, which is underneath the dam. That's how they get water from the lake down into the Feather River below through this hydroelectric power plant. This 9 years ago, this accident injured 5 people. It sounded like a really horrific scene. I think the power plant is still damaged from that incident 9 years ago. But at the time, DWR wouldn't tell us anything about it. We didn't know anything about particulars until 2 years later when a Cal OSHA report came out telling us what happened, and it sounded pretty dire. So after that incident, we've had feelings of distrust with the DWR, not the people on the ground here in Oroville and in Chico. They're all great people, but there just seems to be this greater effort to not tell us everything that's going on. And we've seen the same thing here. Our questions aren't answered adequately. Our access to the site for our photographers is we're kept a long stone's throw away from the site, so we can't really tell exactly what they're doing. And so a lot of people, including us at the newspaper, are concerned that we aren't hearing everything.
Now, I gather DWR was presented, or you invited DWR to see the photos, and they didn't even see them at all.
They didn't want to look at them. I mean, they saw them in the newspaper when we ran them on the front page. But yeah, it was kind of astounding to me that they didn't ask to look at these photos to see what they showed. They delivered a public relations response to what our photos showed, but they never looked at the photos before they give us that response. And the response, of course, was something along the lines of, "We did everything according to the letter of the law." So that was confounding to me. But there have been other people who have been very interested in the photos. The team of independent engineers who are working on a spillway fix right now, they haven't asked for them either, but I'm sure they read the newspaper and look at our website as well, so they probably see where the hole was in the spillway before it became a big hole. But yeah, it was strange to me that they didn't ask to see those.
But I'm sure you and those of your colleagues at the newspaper and the residents, they're probably not feeling very easy about DWR's response, or their responses to different questions. I don't think they're making people feel very easy, are they?
No, there's definitely a healthy skepticism, and so big questions come up, bigger questions like, is the dam itself in danger? And DWR assures us that the dam isn't in danger, but because of past experience, skeptics, like journalists, always tend to wonder, well, are they telling us the whole story there?
Yeah, that leads me. I just wanted to remind everybody that if you have questions, we have a Scribble Live attached to this broadcast, and also we ask for questions prior to the broadcast that were emailed to us through form@bayareanewsgroup.com. And one of these questions from Joe Brandt was that he doesn't see any discussion has any merit whatsoever unless what should be addressed here is water seepage under the damaged spillway, and he's wondering if the chances are high, shouldn't unlimited resources be thrown at the problem, and shouldn't those individuals covering up or dragging their feet be summarily dismissed?
Well, I agree that it's good to be skeptical. We have not heard of one issue with the dam itself. Now, it's important to note that the dam and the spillway are quite a distance from each other. The spillway is off to the north, the dam is off to the south. They are separated. So when the spillway problem developed, it was just a spillway problem. It wasn't a problem with the dam. The dam itself is, as you all know, the largest, the tallest dam in the country, and it's an earth-filled dam. But there has been no problem that we can see with seepage or the dam being compromised in any way. It's just the spillway that's off to the side that's been horribly compromised. But the dam itself seems strong. So again, I think it's good to keep asking the questions, but we haven't had any indication that the dam is in jeopardy in any way.
Going back to DWR, I mean, the way this agency has handled this situation from start to where we are right now, do you think it calls into question their ability to handle disasters?
Well, I think it does. You know, this was, they keep saying this was unforeseen, and one horrible quote from the acting director that it's like your car running out of gas or getting a flat tire, and it's, or running out of oil, I should say, or getting a flat tire. And it's not like that at all. When you have a billion-dollar dam, you need to keep a little bit better care of it and do spillway inspections. If this spillway problem could not have been foreseen on a 50-year-old dam, what does that tell you about the dozens of dams that the DWR does operate up and down the state? I would hope that they're stepping up inspections at other dams, and I would hope the Federal Bureau of Reclamation is doing the same at its dams in this state, like Shasta Dam, because if it could happen in Oroville, obviously it could happen in anywhere. It's the biggest state-owned impoundment, and yet they didn't pay attention to it. That just doesn't make any sense. So you got to spend money right now looking at those other dams, other spillways. They built this structure, the spillway, 50 years ago, and geologists and engineers now say it wasn't thick enough. Well, that was state of the art at the time. So we're looking at all these old dams, old spillways that need to be improved. Will the state spend the money to do it? Will the state water contractors spend the money to do it? That's the question. So far, they've avoided all that because it costs money. But here's an example of something that's costing $4.7 million a day to fix. It's better to pay now than pay later.
Yeah, I agree. I think anyone in the state should be looking at this, and especially if you live near a dam, or if a dam could affect where you live. I mean, like the Oroville Dam and the spillway. I mean, look at how many miles that affected. I mean, going from Oroville all the way to Yuba City and Marysville. I mean that's that's a real eye opener. And there's other situations throughout the state.
Yeah, I think, it's not just the state dams too. It's the federal dams. It's privately owned dams. Everybody needs to look at this closely and learn from it.
Yeah. So going off a little bit, and I'm going to go back in my notes. Forgive me, everybody. But I want to talk about the powerhouse a little bit, because this was another key player as to what happened. The powerhouse located at the base of the dam. Can you talk to our viewers about the significance of the powerhouse, what happened, and why it's important that this has to be fully operational?
Yeah, and it is very important because basically when the powerhouse is fully operational, they can release 14,000 CFS of water from the lake directly through the powerhouse and into the Feather River below. In other words, they don't need the spillway as long as the powerhouse is operational, except when the lake is completely full. Right now, the lake is down 63 feet from the top. And so there was an opportunity yesterday to shut off the spillway and release water only through the powerhouse. But for the longest time, they couldn't use the powerhouse because what happened was that spillway, which is apart from the powerhouse, crumbled, all came down into that diversion pool and basically created a dam in the river. The water backed up from the river into the powerhouse, they couldn't run water through the powerhouse because the water was so high coming out of the powerhouse. There would be nowhere for that water to go because of the dam that was created downstream. So they had to get in there with excavators, tractors, dig it all out. They're still digging it out today. But now they can finally put water through that powerhouse into the river below, shut off the water at the spillway, and that allows them to get a closer look at the spillway. And what they're doing, they say, is reviewing it and trying to decide what steps they need to take on fixing the spillway. But without that powerhouse operational, they wouldn't have been able to shut off water in the spillway because they have to keep the lake going down, or at least not rising as rapidly as it should be. So since they shut down the water yesterday in the spillway and have started running water only through the powerhouse, the lake's risen less than a foot since 5 p.m. yesterday when they shut off the spillway. That's a good sign. However, it's supposed to be 80 degrees this weekend. There's a lot of snow in the watershed. That lake could rise really quickly, and once it reaches a certain level, they'll start putting water down that broken spillway again into the river below, just so the lake doesn't get above a certain level. And that's the balancing act. They want to work on that spillway as much as possible. They want to have people on the ground working on that spillway, but you can't let that lake get to a certain level where there will be uncontrolled water coming over the spillway, because then you're back in the same disaster situation we were in early last month.
And right now, I think they're trying to really lower the lake, the level of the water at the dam. In fact, what was you and I talked about it. What was the irony to that? As far as
refresh my memory. Oh, on the fact that the spillway hadn't been used for so many years.
And also they're trying to lower it to a drought level.
Okay, so what happened was last year, just a little bit more than a year ago, the lake was 250 feet down. It was only 4 feet from its lowest level ever recorded in the lake's history, back in the drought of 72, I think it was. And so 250 feet down, all of a sudden last year we got these El Nino storms, and 4 months later the spillway was being used because the lake was so high for the first time in 5 years. So for 5 years that spillway was never used until last March when they started sending water down it. What they're trying to do now is get the lake down as low as they can. Again, almost treating it like a drought year where they want to get it really low so that when the lake starts rising here with the spring runoff, they don't get into a situation where they have to put water down that spillway. And so that's the game right now, is trying to keep that lake low, artificially low for this time of year. Usually it's almost to the top, but they're trying to keep it artificially low so that they can do the work down below the dam on the spillway.
And especially like you mentioned, it's going to be 80 degrees, and we don't know what the weather is going to be like, because I mean, if we have a mild spring, and so the snow level won't melt all at once, but of course what we've seen in the past here in California, and I'm sure up in your area, we can go right to summer-like conditions real quick.
Yeah, the snowpacks at a near record level up in these parts. This watershed got a lot of snow, and it's great to see, but not when you're worried about it melting into the lake. That snowpack can fill up this lake in a hurry, as we learned this year. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep the lake low, not have to use a spillway, and if they can work on that spillway from now until November 1st, or whatever their magic date is. They hope that they can get it done. The acting director said yesterday they hope to have something operational, but what that something is remains to be seen. A temporary structure or a permanent structure. I don't see how on earth it fits in place by November 1st.
Well, that must set well with other people. So, what are residents saying about this? I mean, you know, there's got to be worried people for miles around, not just in Oroville. And I mean, are people bracing for another disaster?
I think people are very concerned. I don't think that people. The hard part is the variable of the weather. they say they want something in place by November 1st, but it's a very artificial date. It's the start of the rainy season, but that doesn't mean November 1st it's going to start raining, the lake's going to rise and water's going to be rushing down the spillway. Most of the time, in our area, Lake Oroville falls until the middle of December, sometimes January, and then doesn't start rising until December or January, because that's when the rains come. So it's probably incorrect to say they need it by November 1st. Most years they'll be able to work on it all the way till December. Some years, if you don't need the spillway, like the last 5 years we've had, they can work on it all winter long. So I would hope that they're looking at, if they can't get the permanent fix in place by November 1st, I hope they just don't shut off work on November 1st and stop working until the following summer, because a lot of work can get done in a normal rain year. We just haven't had a normal rain year this year.
Here's a question from Mike. I came over to Scribble Live. He asked, I guess DWR said yesterday that the design selection for the temporary repair of the gated spillway will be made next week. The choice is being made before the forensic team of engineer expert has a chance to make a site visit. Isn't the cart before the horse? And don't you want to know all the problems that cause the failure, like seepage under the slab, for example, before making choices of how and what to replace it with?
It seems to me that they really need to know the cause of this before they decide on solutions. I definitely agree with that. Yesterday, in DWR's response to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, they said they are going to be trying to determine the cause and trying to determine a fix by the first week of May. So they're looking at both in tandem, and that they won't have any recommendations until the first week of May. Reading between the lines on FERC's request, it sounded like FERC wanted an answer a lot sooner than that. DWR said, we'll get you an answer by the first week of May.
Well, we're getting a little far into the year here, especially if you're targeting November 1st. And so I think that's part of your skepticism that they're not going to be able to make November 1st.
Yeah, it's a short window. I mean, they've done some miraculous things here in a month and a half as far as digging out that channel that's down below the dam. But it's rebuilding that spillway, depending on what they decide to do, is going to be a huge project. And the state just doesn't work that quickly. I don't see it happening in 6 months.
I guess there's supposed to be a plan of attack coming. I've been hearing reports saying it should be next week. I mean, who knows? Could be next week. I mean, next month. How do you read into that? That you know we're going to come up with a plan. Well, we're not sure. When. I mean, it's getting a little scary here.
What I read into it is that the reality is setting in, that it's not a simple fix, that it's an enormous problem, and the assurances that we've heard all along that things will be in place by November 1st, they're already backing off a little bit, that it might just be a temporary solution in place by November 1st, but they'll have something in place. Well, they have a temporary solution in place right now. It's a broken spillway, and it's water that's going down a ravine that was created by the overflow. They put some cement and slurry and so forth in that ravine to kind of shore it up a little bit, but it's an amazing scar. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. You can drive by Highway 99 that's 15 miles away from the lake and look over and see the scar. It's incredible. But the land has been altered irreparably forever. I mean, it looks like Malakoff diggings. If you ever been to a hydraulic mine up in the Sierra Nevada that was where a hillside was taken away 130 years ago, and you can still tell, that's what we're looking at in Oroville, and we will be looking at for for the rest of our lives, our grandkids' lives. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, and that's got to sit well with residents. You have this constant reminder up there. You have to check that out all the time. So, I mean, what happens if these repairs aren't done in time?
Well, it's all up to Mother Nature. It really is. I mean, if we have a year like this year, there will be some problems next winter. If we have a normal or below normal rain year, I think they can get a lot of work done. But we've seen from that variable this year, and last year was an above average rainfall year too, that this could happen. You got to prepare for the worst case scenario. That's what we've seen the last 2 years. And if we see that again next winter and it isn't in place, a fix isn't in place, then you're back to this crisis management of trying to figure out hour to hour what you're going to do, what you're going to put in the powerhouse, what you're going to put down the regular spillway, what you're going to put down the emergency spillway. And it's just been a fire drill here for a month and a half. You cannot continue to operate the dam like that. Not only just in the number of people and workers here, but just the stress level of the people making those decisions. They have to figure out a way to throw everything at this and try to get something permanent in place, whether it's November 1st or January 1st or whatever. They got to work around the clock to get it done, but it starts with coming up with a plan. And they haven't even gotten there yet, and probably won't for another month.
Well, that's a sad situation. What is this going to be costing taxpayers? I have a two-part question, basically from a viewer, Mike Siegel, and Mike has wondered if anyone's done a Freedom of Information Act request to get payments from the Federal Energy Regulation Commission to DWR for the cost of the Oroville disaster, and has anybody made a request to get the cost summaries from DWR?
So we haven't done that, and the reason we haven't is because we've asked simpler questions that didn't get answered. The simpler questions like, how many workers do you have on this project? And the first response was, I think the first response was 40 to 500. That's a big variation there. Is it 40 workers or is it 500 workers? They couldn't even tell us with any more specificity than that. So asking them which contractors, which companies are working on this. I think there will be a time where eventually we'll get answers to that, but even the simple questions like, can you show us the permits from the Army Corps of Engineers that allows you to fill in seasonal wetlands with rocks and debris from the dam? They said they had the permits. We asked them, we still haven't seen them. So I think there will be a lot of questions like that asked and hopefully answered once we get over the initial emergency response. I think those questions are more likely to come from interested legislators. For example, when we were asking the DWR, hey, how much is this costing taxpayers? We didn't get an answer. And they said, we'll worry about it later. We're just throwing everything we can at the problem. Well, when we asked our 2 state assembly members in this area, what is this costing taxpayers? And they started asking the same questions. Well, guess what? We got an answer, because they got an answer. And they told us an estimate was $4.7 million a day. So they've already spent $200 million on this problem. And I'm guessing that it's probably more than that. There are probably all kinds of other hidden costs that we need to look at. So I think we'll get the answers eventually, but they're in short supply right now.
And you look back when it was originally brought up about the spillway and how it needed to be fixed, and we need to just lay some concrete down, and the federal officials turned it down, saying no, there's no problem, no whatever. I don't know what the cost was then, but it certainly isn't what the cost is now.
Yeah, it would have been a much easier fix. But the problem was, from what we've been told, it's the state water contractors who would have had to come up with the money to pay for those fixes. And they were hesitant. We're talking tens of millions of dollars. Now, another good question is, who's paying for this now? Is it taxpayers? Is it the state water bond from a couple of years ago? Is it the state water contractors downstream? I've seen something that says cities that are part of the state water project are going to be charged for repair costs. I don't think they know, to be fair, where all the bills are going to be sent to. But you know, everybody's going to be paying it. It's not just something that's going to be solved by passing an emergency water bond. Yeah, it's distressing that it all could have been resolved years ago with some easy fixes. But it starts with an agency that believes those fixes need to be made. The agency didn't believe that, therefore they weren't made.
And here we are. they see that. All right, David. Well, thank you very much for the update going on up there, and we're praying for you, the residents and your colleagues, that things will be fixed on time, and you won't have anything to worry about later on this year. But again, that might be wishful thinking too. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, this story is incredible. I mean, I've been in the business for almost 40 years, and it's this story has been on the front page of our newspaper every day but one since February 7th. I've never had a story that stays on the front page for this long. It's just and sometimes up to 12 stories a day on this. It's just been incredible to watch, and it's not going away. It's something we'll be writing about for years and years. Unfortunately, we already have been writing about the whole Mercury licensing process for 15 years. So yeah, it's when they do come up with a plan on May 1st, that's just the beginning of the next chapter, and that next chapter will go on for months and months. And I'm glad that you and people in the Bay Area are paying attention, because it puts pressure on the state to get these fixes done and get them done right.
Well, I do anticipate us doing more of these broadcasts down the road, unfortunately. But like I said, and hopefully the state legislators will put some pressure on, and hopefully, I know they have to do it fast, but in this case, do it fast and do it right. So, okay, David, thank you very much for joining us. I'm Steve Dempsey with the Bay Area News Group. Thanks for joining us.